Okay, everybody. Honesty quarter. Huddle up. So, first of all, I want to start off by saying, thank you all so much for all of the support that I've gotten recently. The subscriber appreciation week really just kind of like blasted off, and I'm just like, it's kind of hard for me to articulate like how appreciative I am of everyone coming in to join me and to, you know, like hang out and basically just like watch all these goofy little videos that I make all the time. That's really cool. I really like, I can't even, I'm not used to having to like, you know, like respond to stuff like this yet. So of course this is gonna seem a little goofy and stilted, but I really, really do appreciate everyone. Like, I appreciate everyone for subscribing. I appreciate everyone for commenting. I appreciate everyone for watching. Like, thank you so much. This has been like very helpful for me because like I've been having like a super hard time lately. So thank you. You all have greatly in some ways improved my mental state. Okay. So I want to start off by saying that. Secondly, it also like, this was supposed to be my 750 subscriber special. And because of the way that my brain works, you know, it has taken me like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 months to try and cobble this together. And a lot of that is because like for a while I was like collecting footage and I was doing this and that. I was writing the little script, I was editing the little script, and you know what, I wanted it to be like all perfect and cool and whatnot. And at the end of the day, like, I don't think it has to be perfect. I don't think it has to be cool. And I don't think it even has to be like, you know, organized. All right. Like, this is like, there's plenty of other creators out there, you know, who are going to be able to give you a less chaotic, more organized, and more cohesive experience. But if I'm going to be honest and genuine and authentic, you're not going to get that kind of cohesion from me, okay? My brain is cooked, and that's just how it's going to be. So guess what? Today, I have a special little, cracked my neck there. Almost thought I was a goner for a second. Today, we're going to talk about something that plagues me, a concept that haunts me. I think bad translation is good. I'm not making any kind of like thesis statement here. As you can see, this is going in the no thesis, just thoughts playlist, where all of my subscriber special rants will be. And maybe someday I will remake it and I'll make it better. But as of right now, I'm just gonna tell you why I think bad translation is good. And guess what? It's not very organized, okay? It's pretty chaotic, but I hope that we can share some concepts and ideas and open some kind of dialogue or discourse over it anyway, okay? So thank you very much for your patience. Thanks for enjoying this schlock. And yeah, so let's just jump right into it. Thank you again so much. Like 900 subscribers. Wow, that's just bonkeroonies. Like, I really appreciate you all. So yeah, enjoy it. Okay, so I'm coming into this conversation as a person who wears a lot of hats. First of all, I've been playing video games almost religiously since about 1998, which is about the age of the dinosaurs by now. So, you know, I've experienced a lot of like really strangely or poorly translated games in my life. The first genre of video games that I really started playing was classic JRPGs, and as you probably know, those games have like a lot of text, okay? Like the majority of those games is just reading. So as you can imagine, I have seen a lot of poorly translated shit in my day, okay? Secondly, I'm coming into this conversation as someone who has extensively studied translation, linguistics, and like cognitive science. I even have like a really useful degree to back up my claims here. But so, you know, hopefully that'll help me explain some of these concepts concepts concisely and quickly and whatnot, because I really don't want to bore you with like translation theory shit. If that's something you're interested in, please let me know. I'll talk to you about it forever, and of course I'll be able to try and apply it to video games as well. Since that's, you know, my first and foremost spot of expertise, I guess you could say, even though I'm not really an expert. But thirdly, and most importantly, I am coming into this conversation as a person with my own thoughts and my own experiences. So at the end of the day, what you're gonna get is my ideas, okay? And I have, of course, already conceptualized the possibility that someone may disagree with me here. And don't worry, I have taken in your hypothetical arguments into account, and I will get into those in the latter half of the video. So, you know, let's just get right into it. Let's talk about bad translations from each of these standpoints. We'll talk about like from a video game player standpoint, and then from a linguistic standpoint, and then we'll talk about it from, you know, my own personal experience with games and what the bad translation has made me feel. And I'm going to try my best to stick to each of those, like, points or whatever. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. If you're new here, my name is Leon. If you're interested in content like this, I actually don't make it a lot. I mostly just do, like, video game Let's Plays and stuff. But I do hope to occasionally make more, like, goofy thought project ideas in the future as I get better at it. Videos like this, my like subscriber special videos, kind of act as like road markers, like points on like a map. Like if this were like a linear JRPG or whatever, like each of these subscriber specials kind of works as like each of the towns that I would visit, you know what I mean? So like they each represent different points of progression in my like journey as a content creator and as specifically as an editor. So yeah, if you like the video, please like it. These are the ones that take me the most time, unfortunately, even though they are some of the less enjoyed ones, but you know, doesn't really matter. That's not what it's about. It's about just blabbing and sharing my thoughts with the open sea. So yeah, thank you so much. Let's get into bad translation as a video game player. So I think that probably one of the first like truly poorly translated games that I played, I don't know, I think it's between Final Fantasy VII and Legend of Dragoon. Legend of Dragoon is just like really stilted. It's like, I don't want to get into it too much, but I'll just show you a little bit on screen right now. Like it just sounds like so stiff, you know what I mean? But Final Fantasy VII is exceptional in its own right, because like you get broken sentences, you get like super uncomfortable like localization, you get like a bunch of typos, you get so much out of this one. I collected as much footage as I could to showcase like the confusion that Final Fantasy VII instills upon the player. Yeah, and then I'll try and talk over that a little bit, but yeah, so like also when you think about like games like this, like for example, Final Fantasy VII has 3 discs. It's a super long game. I think it takes probably, I don't know, like 60 hours, I guess, if you're not grinding or anything to get through it. So like 60 hours of text is quite a bit. You could say like maybe 10 to 15 of that is battles or something, but that's still like that's a lot. That's like a whole series, you know what I mean? So like it's pretty difficult to translate that much, right? Like you can probably imagine, and it's also pretty difficult as a player to go through that much text, okay? And like, yeah, get stopped up every now and again, or literally just do the wrong thing because the text tells you to do the wrong thing, for example. I'll show a little boss fight here. Like if anyone's ever played Final Fantasy VII, like attack while its tail's up is you don't attack while its tail's up. It doesn't make any sense. It just confuses you. So yeah, you know, like, but this, you know, I really wanted to like deeply get into the history of like Squaresoft specifically in translation and how Squaresoft has treated translation. But there's people out there who have done a super, super good job of describing and transcribing and like archiving all of this information. So when I was looking up all of like the history of like Final Fantasy VII's translation as well as Final Fantasy VI's translation, because Final Fantasy VI has some really like some chef's kiss type translation and localization like oddities. As I was looking all this stuff up or whatever, I came across this website that I had never seen before called Legends of Localization. So I just wanted to say, like, if you're interested in stuff like this and if you're interested in like the way like games used to be translated, because like I'll get into this later, but like games overall for the most part, like they're better localized and they're better translated than they used to be. This used to be the standard. This used to be the standard for AAA game studios, production companies, whatever, like developers is I guess what I'm trying to say. Like it all used to be bad. If it was translated, like you were guaranteed to get some mistakes. You were guaranteed to get some mishaps. And I wanted to approach this topic because like I had seen a new game come out and it had a lot of errors as well, and people kind of acted as though like they had never experienced these problems before. And this might be like, you know, thanks to my age in a way, in that I've been able to experience so much from video games and how bad they can really be. You know what I mean? Where I was just like, hey, you guys, it's really not that bad. Like I played like it. I can think of 30 games off the top of my head right now that like read just as poorly as this one. Like it doesn't really detract from like the overall like enjoyment of the game. But then I thought a little bit more about it, and yeah, for some people it definitely does, and I'll get into that later. But first of all, I just wanted to say, like, you guys should just like play a Squaresoft game. And I mean Squaresoft, not Square Enix. I actually don't have a lot of experience with Square Enix games post-merger, but at least hopefully like some of this footage on screen can help you understand like the games were not ever like held to like a super high translation standard. You know what I mean? Like I really, really wanted to get into like the entire history of Ted Woolsey, okay? Because Ted Woolsey is a name where if you don't know him, you should. And if anybody would ever be interested in like a Ted Woolsey deep dive and historical review, I would love to be someone who could do that. That's beyond the scope of my 750, now 900 subscriber special. However, I realized that very quickly when I was writing this, because I was trying to get everything in and blah blah blah. Long story short, it's just that's beyond the scope of this little thing that I really have to produce because it's been months. So whatever, those are my problems, not yours. I won't make them yours. But yeah, so if I can summarize it, like when translating Final Fantasy VI, okay, like Final Fantasy VI was for the Super Nintendo, okay, and so Nintendo of America, they had a lot of rules and restrictions about like what was allowed and what wasn't allowed, okay, so they had a very strong commitment to like parental guidance at the time, and like the ESRB ratings were coming out in the early 90s, or I think around the same time that like Final Fantasy VI would have been translated. And like if you just think about like, okay, this is kind of like before the internet was really like fully developed, okay? So when people were translating games back then, they had to physically send, like I'll put the article in the description, but like Woolsey, for example, he had to physically send VHS tapes of his like translated work like in game, like to Nintendo of America. He had to mail them. He had to mail VHSs. That's like ridiculous. Like, have you, like, some people who see this may never have even touched a VHS tape. You know what I mean? Like, that's like wild for me to think about. But like, it was like a whole other world. You know what I mean? Like, so difficult. So, you know, like it wasn't just that. It wasn't just like the physical limitations. It was also like the content limitations. Like, Nintendo had so many problems with like, oh, you can't like mention death or dying or whatever. And like Final Fantasy VI is a game strictly about death and dying. I don't really know how else to put it. It's like one of the darkest Final Fantasies there is. It's also super good. You should absolutely play it. And if you have any way of playing it in its original form, like the original translation, the original like Super Nintendo marketed as Final Fantasy III, like the cartridge is so weird. Like, but yeah, you should play that one. If possible, because I do know that also through this research that a lot of stuff has been fixed or whatever, which is just, you know, I understand why. But yeah, so I'm not going to get into like the whole history. I did want to. I have a million pages about it, but you know what? It's just, that's beyond this. That's not what this is about. Another thing I'd like to add is that Final Fantasy VII, like at first, it was almost impossible for me to find translation credits for. It actually took me like going on to like a forum and then like rechecking with like the Wikipedia and then finding that it was translated by one person. So that's absolutely absurd. I don't know how true this is, you know, like I can't verify this information, but based on like one article that was interviewing someone who worked on Final Fantasy VII, they only mentioned one person's name. I guess it was like Michael Basket or something. But at the end of the day, like, let's just put this concept into the bank. Like, oftentimes it seems as though there's only one person translating a game, okay? It doesn't matter how long that game is. Chrono Trigger, for example, was translated entirely by Ted Woolsey, and he had a deadline he had to do it in 30 days, you guys. Again, like, that's beyond the scope of this. Like, Ted Woolsey's story is one of the most interesting and remarkable and fun stories to go through. So, you know, maybe some other day, but not today. But yeah, so all right, so now maybe you have an idea of like, okay, so like you know, games have always been translated poorly, and nobody ever cared about it before, and like sometimes it's only one person doing it, which is just a mega massive project, right? So then let's think about like, okay, there's real quick, I don't want to nerd out too hard, I don't want to give you guys a translation theory lesson, but basically in translation there are two different schools of thought. And these two schools are a conversation that was argued over by like Cicero and Horace, like back in the Roman Empire. Okay, so this is a conversation that we humans have been having for 2,000 years. Okay, and we're still trying to figure it out. This is not like an easy thing. Okay, this is not like an easy conversation. But there's two schools of translation theory. Okay, there's translating word for word, and then there's translating sense for sense, okay? So I'm just going to put up a couple little things on the screen right here. We'll do a quick little teaching lesson. So translating word for word, like I personally think that you have to use both schools of thought in order to translate something effectively. There are some things that, and many people agree with me, this is not something unique to me. This is not me saying like, oh, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? This is something that a lot of people agree on. So translating things word for word, if we put that into video game terms, like that would be translating like the inventory screens, okay? Or like the effects of items or the magic effects or like equipment or whatever. So translating word for word is used for like technical things, you know, for like medical or legal documents or whatever. So video games, as you can tell right now, they utilize both schools of thought, okay? So you have to be good at two different types of translating in order to translate a video game. It's not simply just interpreting, you know what I mean? Like if you were interpreting for someone who's a tourist or something, like if you're like a tour guide and you have to interpret like what one person is saying to another person in a different language, that's more translating sense for sense. That's the other school of thought. So translating sense for sense, you know, you use that to translate like the overall meaning or the overall vibes of something. Okay, so that's the majority of the story. So that would basically be like in a video game, like translating all of the characters' dialogue or translating like the different kinds of books or texts that you could find in the game. And there's a lot of different ways that people end up doing this. Like you can take, for example, like the way that things are translated in a game like Genshin Impact, like the way that the talents are translated or the way that each of the stories are translated. like if you compare and contrast them. So like the sense for sense style of translating, that's focused on like the reader's experience instead of translating, you know, exactly as they say, word for word, what the things say in the source language. That's another thing I just want to clear up really quickly. There's like the source language is what you're translating out of, and then the target language is what you're translating into, if that makes sense. So when you're doing sense for sense translation, you're trying to translate like the vibes, you know, like the intricate, like inherent, like hidden meaning basically in the source language into the target language. So it's kind of like a multi-step process. You're trying to keep like the original meaning or effect even. So part of the problem that you run into here is like as we advance throughout time or whatever, you might think like, oh, well, why don't they just have like, you know, like Google Translate do the translation for video games and like eliminate the need for people entirely. But like that's absurd. You can't have you ever tried to translate something from Google Translate? Like, so what these machines are really good at doing is translating word for word, but because of that kind of like extra finesse that goes into translating something sense for sense, you can't necessarily get the same type of vibe, or you can't necessarily get the same type of meaning from a machine translation that you can get from a person translating. And so in some ways, this is like, I feel bad for anyone who ultimately has to watch any type of YouTube video with like translated subtitles, because like those subtitles aren't really going to say exactly what the YouTuber is like trying to say, you know what I mean? So yeah, shouts out to anyone who has to watch videos with subtitles in their original language. You're doing God's work out there. I'm sure this is very difficult for you, but I hope you still understand what people are trying to say. Another issue like that might come up, like it just with regards to translation theory, is that like in a perfect world, things would be translated from like you would have a native speaker translating into the target language. Okay, so say you have a game like Final Fantasy VI, right? It was translated by an English speaker into English, right? So that's like an ideal situation. However, when you think about like other game developers and stuff or other games, those companies might not have access to native speakers, whether that's based on like geographical location or budget or whatever. So it actually might be impossible for them to have this perfect situation. And that's another thing to take into account. Like, but basically what I'm trying to say in so many different words here with this like theory aspect is that it's very difficult to check off all of the boxes that are like deemed or like preferred as necessary to get like a perfect translation. Okay, it's a very difficult process, right? So taking into account like how difficult this process is, I think it's important for us to like treat that process as something that is difficult, and therefore maybe we treat it a little more softly, you know what I mean? Like but like, okay, so let me see here. But like, okay, so now I think it's a good point to try and speak to people who might think like, oh, but the translation is so bad, I don't understand what's going on, and therefore it's like impacts my, you know, like enjoyment of the game. And yeah, okay, that's totally valid. It's not like, you know, like bad translation is accessible. Okay, so like I can only speak to my experience as a native English speaker, and therefore I play all of my video games in English right now. Yes, I know, very shameful, working on it. I would love to play one game in its original language entirely at some point, just so that I could have like that experience. I mean, like I have had that experience with like English language games, okay? But I mean like one that is... Do you understand what I'm saying? I just like, I know it's kind of goofy, but I didn't quite word it properly. But you know, I would like to play Final Fantasy VI like in Japanese at some point, to put it simply, right? Like that would be really cool. That would be like a big achievement for me. as a little language freak. But yeah, in some cases, like, a bad translation can ruin your entire experience of the game. Ultimately, the text is your main connection to the game, and it's your only connection to it besides, like, the actual gameplay. Like, you're gonna spend the majority of any game reading, whether you like it or not. I mean, not every game is like that, obviously. I can think of some, like, sandbox games that really don't involve reading or whatever, but when it comes to, like, RPGs of any kind, classic JRPG or, you know, like, adventure RPG or whatever, like, you are gonna end up reading a lot. Or dating sims too, honestly, because, like, the main reason I'm making this is because there was a dating sim that came out that I played a lot of, and people were so mad about the translation that's why we're here. That's how I got here. And, like, I don't want to make this too long, but yeah, like, if a translation is bad, obviously it's going to alienate a ton of players. But I think that, you know, as long as you can still understand, like, how to play the game, and as long as you can still understand, like, the intent or the feeling or the sense behind what the characters are saying, which I think even in the worst translated games that I have played, I was still able to, as a native English speaker or whatever, you know what I mean? I was still able to glean or extract, like, the initial intent behind the words, you know? I think it's a matter of, like, taking a little bit of extra time and having a little bit of extra patience in order to understand, like, what the stuff says. Like, you know, like, I obviously, like, you know, ultimately bad translation is inaccessible. It's not good for the developers and it's not good for the players. But I mean, if you haven't been playing video games for very long, then, like, maybe you're not aware of all of the, like, truly, like, so, you know, the concept, like, so bad it's good. Like, people love bad movies, right? I love bad movies, bad television, whatever. Like, bad translation has always kind of been treated that way as well, like, in the gaming world. Like, if you think all the way back to something like Zero Wing, which actually predates my time, so I can't really speak to that, but if you think about the lines like, all your base are belong to us, or someone set us up the bomb, I prefer that one. Like, these are like ancient, like, vintage memes, you know what I mean? And, like, everybody can appreciate a nice vintage, right? Like, at least I hope so. Like, there's also, like, so something that's for more like my time is a little game called Robot Alchemic Drive. So, see, sadly, I don't own this game yet. There's never been a right time to add it to my collection, but I'll just grab a video from YouTube or something and I'll credit the person here. But Robot Alchemic Drive has, like, one of the worst translations ever, and it's voice acted. And normally you don't really get that. Like, if a game is dubbed, sometimes the translation's better. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's because, like, the voice actors try and, like, help out a little bit, but this is a combination of both, like, really stiff translating, almost machine sounding translation, as well as really goofy dubs too. Like, it's really funny. You know what I mean? So, like, in a sense, like, the translation it is bad, right? But it's, like, it's still good. It's still able to be appreciated. It's just able to be appreciated, like, in a different way, right? And I think that's really cool. Like, the concept of something being so bad that it's good. Like, I think that that's something that a lot of people, I mean, okay, it's not like everyone enjoys it, right? But I really do, okay? And this is my silly little corner of the internet, so I get to talk about what I want here, I guess. Like, if a translation falls into that, like, bad category, which I think, honestly, in some ways, this game that I'm referencing, and I won't reference by name, okay, because I understand how much work goes into translating something, but I will show it on screen. I just don't want it to be, like, in the metadata that hard, you know? I genuinely think, like, that it's still enjoyable. I think, like, part of what makes it enjoyable is how goofy the translation is. You know, like, it's a really hard job. It takes a really long time. Everyone is always rushed. Like, if you've ever worked any kind of job, you already know, like, there's never enough people working, okay? So just, like, extrapolate that to like a game developer studio or whatever, and imagine you're like a translator, you're probably like hired online or some shit. You probably never even get to have like an IRL conversation with the person anymore. Like, it's not an easy job, okay? So, that's why I think it's kind of foolish to say that like a translation is bad, I guess. There's way too much that goes into it. There's like way too much that has to be considered or whatever, and ultimately, like, if you can still play the game, like, and if you can still figure out like what to do, like, the gameplay isn't usually that affected by a translation. Like, obviously sometimes it is, like in this example in Final Fantasy VII, like, attack while its tail's up. I mean, but the thing is like, you attack while its tail's up and then you learn that's not what it meant, so it doesn't really matter. You figure it out anyway. Again, in the interest of time, I don't want to talk about this forever, but I totally could. I went completely off script because my original script was like, took up like an hour long, and I think I just focused on too many different things and it got too wacky and too wild, but I don't really want to do that. I just want to post this so that I can get back to my Let's Plays, you know what I mean? But yeah, so anyway, let's just wrap this up with a few questions, obviously, because at the end of the day, like, I just want this to be like an opening for discourse and discussion. So, what do you guys consider to be bad translation? So part of why I ask this is because I think everyone would answer differently. I think that some people would call like syntactic problems bad, and I think some people would call like semantic problems bad. Now, I personally, I don't have a problem with either one. I can get over all of it, but that's just because like bad translation, it slows me down. It allows me like more time to read, basically. If I have to read something over twice, I'm gonna remember it. Like, so I don't know, but I love it personally. It helps me out. But as for you all play video games. You know what I mean? Like, what, and I'm sure you've played translated video games. So what makes translation bad? I'm just curious. I want to like collect a little data, and then maybe when I go into remaking this video far in the future, I can take everyone's comments into account, right? And then I can do like a little bit more of like a study on it, and I can fully flesh it out. So I would really appreciate your help on this one. Obviously, I would include your comment in that future video. I also want to know, like, do you guys have like other examples of really poorly translated games? Like, obviously I have like an entire collection full of goofily translated games, but I know that everybody's got different game experience and whatnot. So if you guys want to share with me, if you could please share with me, is more so what I'm asking. I want to be direct. If you could please share with me some of your examples of really poorly translated games, that would help me out a lot. I would love that, because I would at some point like to like flesh this out more. I just don't think it can be like a little subscriber special, because I think I need to take as much time with it as I need. So yeah, I don't know. If you also like, if you think like a bad translation really fucks up your like enjoyment of a game, I would also like to hear from you, because I really want to be able to have like a wide variety of like player responses on something like this, so that I can, like fully explore it. I don't want to just explore like one opinion or one concept. I want to try and like get like a complete thing. You know what I mean? I want a complete picture of what the bad translation experience is like for video game players. So yeah, let's see. I don't know. Basically, I don't really want to get into all of this, but I wrote way too much shit down, but it's just not good. It's just not right. So hopefully y'all were able to understand what I said in some ways. I know that like the visuals for this might not be like super exciting, because it's basically just like really bad video game translation in the background, but hey, you know what? I hope you enjoyed it in some way. I hope that we can, in a way, like collaboratively like discuss this concept a little bit more, so that I can so that I can treat this concept with the respect that it deserves in the future. because this is not it. You know what I mean? This is just me waffling, I guess it would be the British term for it. This is me just waffling off about translation. Just because like a year ago I got really mad that everyone was like, wow, this translation sucks. I can't understand anything. And it's just like, well, you probably can though. You probably can. You just have to like try a little harder. Like, this is a really difficult job, and probably only one person was tasked to do it, and they were probably given like a month. Like, never forget, Ted Woolsey had to translate Chrono Trigger in a month. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. That's unfair. That's inhumane, you guys. Inhumane. So, yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, hopefully someday I will be able to approach this topic with more time and more thought. I mean, I kind of forgot how hard it was to like write a paper, you know what I mean? I haven't written a paper in years. It's been a really long time since I wrote a serious paper. And this experiment reminded me how much work it actually takes to write one that is understandable. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope to see you again in the Let's Plays. Allow me to remind everyone that we're actually really close to doing the lobster thermidor video. We're only 100 subscribers away from the lobster thermidor video. And so once we get to 1,000, like I had tried to mention before, I will take a poll. I still have to locate a like sort of restaurant like environment where I can like do all this cooking and whatnot, which I don't think will be that difficult, but lobster thermidor soon, obviously, right? We're almost there. That should be fun. Yeah, cool. I hope you had fun today listening to me ramble. I do look forward to reading your bad translation experiences in the comments as well. And yeah, I need to take a sip of water now. Okay, bye.